like I work with a lot of folks who had music degrees, and I always say this, not that I'm degrading any music degree or anything, right? But people think you have to be computer scientists and all those things to end up in cyber. I mean, you came from law, that's like even you're probably the first one I've heard from that space. Maybe I usually will see them in privacy and so forth, but you're like pretty much full-fledged cyber. So how did that transition? Like, you know,
I think there is actually quite a nice overlap. So naturally with like, so we went through ISO 21701 certification here. It was actually kind of funny because like, I don't know if you're familiar with it really, but there's all these standards and policies.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. And we're going through this, and the auditor basically says, "Well, you haven't listed all of the laws that might apply to you." And I was like, "List all of the laws." It was like one of those memes where it'd be like, "Oh, you're a chef, like name every vegetable." It's like and I think it's my view of it very much is I think there is a really nice overlap between like compliance, law, and cybersecurity. Those really do go quite hand in hand if you use them as tools for achieving things. But then when you
Absolutely.
see compliance as like a checkbox or like a requirement, and law as like a requirement, and you don't view it as like intention based, then like they're not really related at all, right?
Yes.
But I think there are components of when you understand the law, you then understand like what they're trying to achieve, and then you try to understand how you actually do that. And I think that that's been true for me even before I was in cybersecurity as such, when it comes to like data privacy, GDPR
Yeah.
compliance, things like that, which naturally fell on my table just because someone would find out I have a law degree, and they'd come over and say, well, now this is your job. And,
And yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because, we always say cyber pretty much touches everything. And who would have thought like cyber insurance was a thing, right? And now it's a thing. So I had a old colleague that was in like insurance, and she was like, "Hey, I'm trying to like go into cyber. Like, is there something for me?" I said, "There's absolutely something for you." Like, I don't think we even have people who understand, like that space yet in terms of like how do we do the numbers for cyber insurance and so forth. And there's probably very limited people in that space.
No, absolutely. And I think it touches, like you said, because it touches all of these, like in the end, it's almost like the ideal state of the world is like cybersecurity teams are sort of just spread across, like, because you have to touch everyone. But that's also why cybersecurity teams get such a bad rap, because they can be like quite annoying, right?
Yeah,
Because like
yeah.
you have to touch everything, and you're like, what?
They're
Why?
always to tell me what to do.
Right? Why can't you stay in your corner and do the
Yeah,
cybersecurity good over there, right?
yeah. Awesome. So that's a good segue into how you kind of ended up where we are, and especially in this conversation, because as much as like I love that quote by the way when you said, "I guess I'm a researcher now, security researcher now." I found that very interesting. So since we're here to talk about the vulnerability that you discovered in Copilot, how did that come to be? Like, how did that accidental discovery come to play out?
Right. Yeah. Because I'm not right now. We're building this new insider threat detection product, basically. So I'm just looking at everybody's cloud audit logs, so both in Microsoft and all the things we integrate with. And one of our customers had told us that there's a lot of hesitation on their side to roll out Microsoft 365 Copilot in their organization, because it's very hard to kind of track, like, and I think this is a common concern. This isn't the first person who said this, is that there's a very like hard job of trying to find out like what are people using it for versus all of the traditional tooling we've set up
Yes.
to monitor things like SharePoint file accesses and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Using AI allows you to do things that maybe you wouldn't have been able to before. So a great example would be if your permission sharing in your organization is not brilliant, like if you've not been super strict about like minimum, like least
Least
privilege,
privileged access. Yeah.
right? Then you roll out Copilot, and unfortunately, you can just type in like, "Hey, what's the salary of everyone in the company?" And if
And
you
then
have access, even if you don't know you have access, Copilot, it inherits your permissions. So as a result, it can find if your company is not great about permissions.
yeah.
And so this customer had said they're very hesitant to this. I really wanted to roll this into our product, was to make it so that if people are using Copilot to take information that maybe doesn't really fit their role and they shouldn't, we would be able to identify that. And so to do that, I had to give myself a Microsoft 365 Copilot license, which was I know something I did not
Yeah.
think